Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our July Charging Ahead webinar series. The topic today is virtual power plants and the state of the art in them, with some benchmarking and case studies from both Australia and the US. So, before we begin, let us do a few housekeeping matters first. So, the agenda will be covering drivers of distributed energy resources, of which virtual power plants are a key um, type. Their services, economic sources, and business models. Then we'll be diving into some of the benchmarks and case study work we've done, and then finish with takeaways and recommendations before doing some Q&A. Um, this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to all registrants along with this presentation. I'll be supported by my colleague Sarah, who will be monitoring the queue of questions for the Q&A session. Now, please note that there is a survey that we put out to get everyone's feedback as to the topics of greatest interest to them, so that we can factor that into our future agendas. All right, my name is Ezra Beeman. I'm managing director. I look after both the U.S. office based here in Davis, California, as well as the Australian office in Sydney, Australia. I also, I guess, manage a solar battery technology startup in Australia. So I do have some, I suppose, insights from that experience that I'll be bringing to today's discussion. All right, well, let's talk about the drivers of decentralized energy resources. I think decentralized energy resources, or DER, has been a long time coming and really kicked off with rooftop solar PV. Um, but there are a growing array of drivers that seem to be putting a much greater emphasis on the potential role and impact of decentralized energy. So let's go through some of those here and how they might be able to help the wider industry. So really the key driver of DER is decarbonization. I think if we were to not change any of our behaviors, then the current system, would probably do pretty well. But certainly because we have to, in many of the jurisdictions, not all in the U.S. has recently pulled out of the Paris Agreement, decarbonize our energy systems. And we've listed here some of the leading states in terms of their commitments and the transparency of their information. And you can see that there is a range of different sectors that need to be decarbonized, whether it's residential buildings, commercial buildings, industrial, transport, or electric power. Now, as we've summarized here, in each case, there's either a direct link to electrification of the end use or an indirect link, for example, via hydrogen. So all in all, we're moving all of the current energy and into the electricity system or derivatives of it, for the most part, in these particular jurisdictions. Um, Now, in addition to the need to replace our existing fleet of fossil fuel generation, and also to electrify a lot of the end uses, we are also dealing with the potential for data center loads to grow. Now, this actually comes from our previous data center webinar, and it was used to highlight the uncertainty around this load, which can range by tenfold. Um, but the point to make here is that this is a significant increase in demand on energy systems. And one way that we can help make this less costly is to potentially clear out some of the existing load on the subtransmission and transmission lines through decentralized energy. Now, turning to the US, and this comes from a recent 2023 energy outlook that the EIA produces, and there are a range of different scenarios for how much capacity and generation is going to be used. You can see that generation and the doesn't actually vary very much between these scenarios, but the level of gigawatts does quite considerably. Anywhere from about doubling of our current capacity to maybe 2.5 times. And of course, all of this costs money. In order to connect all of these new renewable sources of power, um, uh, we need a whole new transmission system. And that's because transmission often is designed to carry energy from major generating stations, which might be near coal mines or gas systems to go where the wind blows and the sun shines. And you can see here a significant development is currently underway. This comes from a 2024 PNNL study. Now, in conjunction with all of this renewable energy is a rise in curtailment of this renewable energy. And we see the forecast for 2030 in the Western Interconnect to the bottom right. And it is expected to grow from there as we get towards higher and higher saturations of, um, of renewable energy in the bulk supply system. Now, turning to the distribution system, and this comes from a simulation we did for a Northeast utility. On the top left, you see system peak demand. And you see on the low scenario where we do not implement virtual power plants and we don't implement more aggressive regressive energy efficiency or virtual power plant demand response products. Peak demand is scheduled or is forecast to rise pretty significantly over the period, largely because of electrification. In the medium and high, we actually look to achieve lower cost and even higher CO2 targets. And you can see here the addition of more energy efficient programs, as well as virtual power plant programs, can really help keep peak demand lower. On the bottom left, you see the impact of more heating and water heating electrification on the non-transmission load and see it moving from a summer evening peak to a winter morning peak under each of these scenarios, largely because of the rooftop solar PV impact. Bottom right is showing the relative level of curtailment as total solar PV rises. So again, I could have put in here all of this costs money. So and how much money and sort of what are we playing for here in terms of getting virtual power plant and distributed energy resources correct? This comes from work we've done in Australia. Australia is a little bit smaller than California in peak demand terms, but you can see here we are estimating $70 billion by 2050 in savings from effectively integrated virtual power plants, mostly in T&D capex as well as wholesale costs. NEM is the national electricity market there. A more recent study we did, which was mainly looking at bulk system benefits and looking at it by the different sort of distributed energy resource, shows a number that's around 40 billion. So it actually lines up pretty well from the above study, which was conducted a number of years earlier. All right, so let's talk about how that sort of an impact and outcome can be achieved using distributed energy resources. Well, the first thing is to really understand what are the kinds of services that these virtual assets can deliver. And you see here there's a range of services that are currently purchased by various players in the utility value chain, whether it's independent system operator, transmission and distribution businesses, or load serving entities. Because I want to cover a lot of ground, I'm not going to go into detail here other than to introduce this slide. But pretty much any of this can be addressed through a virtual power plant or alternative service providers or service methodologies. Now, again, I won't dive too deeply in this, but one of the key things to understand about distributed energy economics is because it can do many things, because it's situated often very deep into the grid, it can actually get value from a number of different value sources or revenue streams. And by offsetting the core cost of these resources across a number of different use cases, it can make each of those use cases more competitive. And here we're just comparing a utility scale 3-hour storage system to a bunch of Tesla Powerwall 3s that have been virtualized. And once you take off some of the cost of that system to do distribution services and some other grid services, then the actual cost in the wholesale bulk supply market can be considerably less. On top of that, it can be easier to deploy or at least harness this technology than augmenting transmission lines, adding an interconnector, or connecting to a new renewable energy zone, as we show on the bottom right. Again, these are for Australia timelines. They vary in the US, of course. We've done analysis to try and estimate how much each different type of distributed energy resource is. We did it based on how much a battery is paid in most virtual power plants. And this is again from the Australian source, but we give you the numbers so you can unpack this in a way that applies to the US. But they fundamentally have different values because they have different capacities during the peak period or during different service periods, and different energy consumption levels as well. So what we're seeing here on a peak kilowatt basis, that level 2 charging, because it was so correlated with actual peak demand, delivers the greatest value per device compared to a Tesla Powerwall in the bottom right. So understanding these resources, what value they can offer, is really fundamental to putting together a program to save money overall as the energy systems transition. In terms of what each nameplate looks like, we put that here. And what we're seeing in some of our long-term optimization is that there is sufficient flexible load over time that you can pretty much deliver a flat load profile if that's the least cost option. Now, in reality, it's not anymore. Like, this is a great look for a T&D operator, potentially, certainly a distribution operator, because it's the least cost to serve, assuming you can notch out load when you need to take assets out of service. But to complement the wholesale bulk supply system that's increasingly renewable, you have to actually use energy when there's excess, and use less when there's less renewable energy. So it's really flexibility that's most valuable. In terms of how much of this resource there's going to be, these are from the market operator in Australia. You can see flexible battery capacity. You can see flexible vehicle to grid capacity. They're a little bit, my view, pessimistic about how much vehicle to grid capacity will be offered, but it's early days. The other key assumption is how much of the resource is going to be flexible. And here we're basically showing that when it comes to storage, yes, there's some concern about having enough in the battery if there's an outage. But generally, people for the right money are happy to offer a lot of that to VPP operators. It's believed at this stage that there'll be less willingness in a vehicle, but our view is that it's likely to grow to about the same level as battery storage. And the reason for that is that the analytics will get a lot better. And if you think about water heating, that's something that if somebody were to say, "Hey, I want to control your water heater," you immediately think about cold water. Almost is probably more more emotive than not having enough juice in your car battery to go somewhere. And yet they made that into a product using controlled load that has been successful in the northeast of the U.S. and in Australia. So I think they'll get there. All right, now let's talk about the two key business models emerging to tap into this resource. One is the virtual power plant, which is the title of this webinar. Here, it's characterized by guaranteed payments to participants, is managed by a VPP operator. It delivers a range of services. The VPP operator is generally the one exposed to risk and reward. It still requires service definitions to operate, and the main gap is those service definitions. If you want to deliver a voltage compensation service in one distribution area, one utility area, it's going to vary from utility to utility, and that increases barriers to entry, transaction costs, etc. And that's probably the key hangup. We have it all for markets for the most part. Most ancillary services and real power provision is well defined in organized independent system operator run markets, etc. And there's no barrier there. It's really in the T&D side of the equation where almost no virtual power plants are effectively reducing peak demand, supporting voltage, etc. Although that is changing. Home energy management systems. Now, this is a different business model, and I think I've seen it starting to emerge in Texas, where you can have wholesale pass-through retail offers. It's certainly growing in Australia. Here, it's market-based payments to participants via 5-minute prices directly from the wholesale market. It's managed by a HEMS operator, and it delivers who deliver an optimization service to consumers. The consumer is generally the one exposed to risk and reward. Requires cost-reflective pricing, like 5-minute settlement in the wholesale market, and ideally 5-minute pricing, which is pretty close to real time for networks as well. The main gap at the moment is cost reflective network pricing, and we've got many examples in Australia. I haven't. I mean, we've got some like base power, for example, in the U.S., but certainly more work's needed to identify who is leading the charge here. All right, let's talk about some case studies then. So turning first to Australia, so in Australia, it's more like the Texas market where you have competitive retailers and generators that operate on regulated transmission and distribution grids. They've got 5-minute settlement. They've got a pretty aggressive transition plan by 2045, I think, and they're transitioning from mainly a coal system with some natural gas to renewable energy. So we've got a range of potential VPP providers. Some of them are, we call them energy retailers. These energy retailers offer gas and electricity, and that's their primary business. They also offer virtual power plants to complement it. Then we've got the VPP operators. That's all they do. They get customers. They run the operation. They sell services to retailers, or even sometimes they're a retailer themselves. And then we've got the battery companies like Sonnen and Tesla that are actually battery retailers that also happen to run their own VPP. Um, I think I won't go into the detail here. It's really just for reference. Let's talk about some of the value-added analysis we did on top of this. So one of the key things about a VPP is how many hours a year are you going to ask the customer for? Because if you're going to say, "Hey, I want all your hours," well, then the customer gets no benefit in their eyes, and then they're going to want a really high return. On the other side, if you hardly ask for any hours, and you can't do much with it. And so, what is the right number of hours, I guess, to contract for as part of the program? Well, you can see here the players. There's a little bit of convergence in the 400 to 500 hours per year. Outliers at 1,000 and 100. Now, if you use less hours and you do it well, you should be able to offer a higher dollar per kilowatt hour, and you see Origin doing that here. Shine Hub that asks for more is sort of in the middle of the pack, and then the others are somewhere in the middle. Now, the other question is which batteries do you accept into your VPP, and what other resources? These are all VPP all battery focused VPPs, and you can see Tesla, LG, SolarEdge. The usual suspects are accepted in most of them, and then there's sort of the tail end here of less common solutions. Now, in terms of the economics, this is really where the rubber hits the road. We've estimated how much they're making on their wholesale revenue. This is just pricing arbitrage, buy low, sell high, and then some revenue from frequency control ancillary services. We can also estimate their cost. This is gross margin costs, based on their VPP sign-up bonus, credits, etc. And then we can bring it all together. And we're showing here that Origin seems to have the highest return based on their system, where they're getting a lot of the value from ancillary services, and giving a little bit of it back. Then it varies across them. But I mean, this is one of the key challenges for commercial VPP operators is, how much do we give back, especially when we're on the hook? We're guaranteed to pay this. How do we cover our costs and still deliver an attractive return to our shareholders or our community if you're a muni? All right, so let's just talk quickly about the HEMS example, and we're using Empower, which I have some experience with. Here, we just want to show that in this case, the home energy management system is managing solar, it's managing hot water, it's managing EV charging, and it's managing the battery. So that is, in kilowatt hour terms, maybe 20 to 25 kilowatt hours when you take the EV and the hot water into account. And then you've got the battery power of the inverter capacity of around 5 kilowatts. Hot water is about 4.8 kilowatts, and the EV is up to 7 kilowatts. So it's quite a lot of resource to manage behind the house. On the right side, you can see an example where prices are forecast to rise towards the end of the day. The system is optimizing for that across all those resources, and then generally either exporting or turning off everything. And you can see here the amount of credit that's being accrued here is significant. Our best performing sites at this stage are earning around $100 a day from these opportunities. Now, it doesn't happen. This might be top 10 days a year at best, but certainly a very different experience to the one where the VPP is paying you maybe $200 a year in total. You don't have to worry about it. You're going to get that no matter what. Now, in the U.S., we also did a similar sort of benchmarking activity. You can see here a range of options. You can see what segments they're serving, the resources, the grid services they're offering, et cetera. Now, again, I don't want to dwell on this. I want to sort of move on to the analysis in terms of what we're seeing. So increasingly, I think what we're seeing is VPPs offering a range of service here. You can see most are offering capacity services, mostly to T&D, but maybe resource adequacy. Ancillary services are the second most common. Then operational flexibility for distribution systems, and finally, actually an energy service. Now, how many days a year do the VPPs operate as part of their contracts? In the US, we see a clear trend towards 100% management. And in this sense, the VPP and the HEMS are sort of merging, because the offer for the customer is, hey, we're going to manage your devices to minimize your bill 100% of the time, but sometimes we'll also use it to reduce grid costs. And as a result, you'll save and we'll pay you some more, which might be the way forward for everyone. In terms of how much they're paying, dollar per kilowatt varies a lot, and we didn't actually see a lot of consistency here or relationship between how much was paid and customer adoption. So we're certainly in the self-selection part of the learning curve or the industry maturity curve here. In terms of how much you get per customer, that's going to vary based on whether it's a residential or commercial. But you can see somewhere between 5 and 10 is a pretty common range. Finally, how significant are these VPPs? And that goes back to how much can they impact on the whole cost of system. And we're seeing increasingly, and most of these on the right are newer than ones on the left, that we're seeing some of these programs going as high as over 10% of total system capacity. Second tier is in the sort of 4%, but we expect more of these to grow over time as there's more resources, the costs are lower, and the need for them is higher. Finally, in terms of how much gets developed every year, this helps normalize those programs that have been around longer. You get some information here. Okay, so in terms of key takeaways, um, our findings have been that decarbonization is going to drive a lot of investment, and that's going to come with costs that are going to increase rates and are going to increase bills, and there will be an affordability uh, concern and pushback. So, by integrating DER effectively in the planning, delivery, and delivery of it, implementation of it, and operation, you could reduce total system costs by 100 billion in California alone, just using a scale up of the Australian example. So DER includes a wide range, a full range of resources, not just solar and storage. There are two main business models are emerging: the VPP and the HEMS. For VPP, the trend appears to be away from lock-in contracts and towards bring your own device, 100% managed, and multiple services delivered. Current VP positioning is wide ranging, but there is some consistency in the value paid per kilowatt, if not the hours reserved. It's an immature market, but growing rapidly, and players are evolving their strategies, business models, offers, products, and services. It remains to be seen if the low risk, low reward VPP or high risk, high reward HEMS model is the way forward, or hybrid. So our key recommendations, based on all of the work we've done, is that it's critical you understand the long-term cost of service of the existing system, the potential for DER, and it's also a cost of service to enable targeting of the best opportunities. Consider trialing both VPP and HEMS business models to keep the options open. VPPs can be hard to communicate to customers, and there can be social license issues where they're concerned about accessing their batteries when at least it doesn't do them any good. HEMS requires some institutional things to be in place, including wholesale prices and access to markets, as well as T&D prices, ideally in real time. We recommend monitoring best practice and lessons learned because things are changing all the time, and even in the last few years, we've seen that the move to multiple services, 100% management, etc. The other key gap is organizational capacity and capability. This is a new area. It's come out of nowhere. And most utilities, they might have a load management manager. They might have, a real-time operations folks. But doing this right means understanding what um, the 2B requirements are for a utility or a VPP operator, and making sure that you've got the right resources, skills, and the right capacity to be able to do which part of this you're aiming to do. If you just try and do it with where you are now, then you're more likely to be set up for failure. So moving forward, it's important that utilities that are looking to integrate DER ensure the impacts and controls are included in operations, forecasts, and plans to lock in the benefits, or to plan to lock in the benefits, and that it's important to recognize that internally, culturally, there will be resistance to new kinds of assets, and that the existing kinds will be preferred overall until people get comfortable with them and you have much more familiarity with them. So thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of that. We'll open the discussion for Q&A. I realize people are going to have to leave in a few minutes, but thank you very much, and please sign up for our next topic, which is going to be on nuclear technology and its cost effectiveness. Please also don't forget to vote for your favorite Charging Ahead webinar topic, which we've listed a few options there. What is a significant barrier to mass participation? Um, well, there are so many, and it depends on which market you're in. Um, I think the biggest issue at the moment is just the lack of incentives. There's not a great understanding of how much the utility cost of service is, in spatially, or even on a long-term basis. And so the incentives that are being sent for these resources is probably a lot lower than they should be. Tesla for the longest time advertised on the pure basis of reliability. That's changing a bit now, but you don't buy a battery in California because it's a good investment for the most part, and that needs to change. so I'll start with just the market size. You can provide services to the wholesale market. Sometimes you have to be a minimum size, but that's fine. And depending on what the um, peak off peak prices is, how much negative prices, there might be value that can be tapped into. But that's only half of the sort of bill, and the other half is T&D, and there's no ability to access and provide value there, and therefore make a better offer to get more people to adopt. The other issue is selling this to customers. I've personally tried to sell VPPs to customers, and it's a very complex topic. I mean, only the industry could come up with something as not consumer friendly as a virtual power plant. People are more used to Airbnb and Airbnb their extra bedroom or what have you. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done, making this a much friendlier consumer focused product or service. All right. Well, we are at time. Um, Thank you very much again for your attendance. Please let us know if you have any questions or have any issues opening any of the material, and please do forward on to people you think might be interested. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in October. Have a great summer.